Not me, not Hermione, you. Be a quad. Why are we making them a trio? Ron is such a hater. I'm like, bro, this is your wife. Hi, my name is Cassidy and thanks for visiting my channel. Today we are going to be doing a books versus movies. And do the movies, good old Hollywood, do they hold up to the standard of the books? Are they better than the books? Or do the books remain superior? So today's our first thing is we are going to do the first of many of the Harry Potter series. We're starting with Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Came out in 2001. A lot of people know about Harry Potter. They know the lore and all of that. My husband and I, we just recently watched all the movies again, and it was just so much fun that we are now reading the books together. And let me tell you, I haven't read those books in so long that I've kind of forgotten a lot of details. And can I just say, Neville is so underrated. I will die on this hill. Neville is so underrated and Ron is a hater right off rip. So we'll kind of get into that some more, but there have been so many details that it's been kind of fun to kind of play a game of seeing how the movies and the books are the same and how are they different. So we're going to start with the first book. I have my notes and we're just going to kind of get into it. I'm going to, spoiler alert, I'm going to go through the whole book chapter by chapter. Nothing to it, just to do it. So starting with chapter 1, it basically starts out in the book that Mr. Dursley, Vernon, he goes about his work day. He's noticing that there are a lot of wizards about, like a lot of strange people in cloaks with, weird fashion sense, basically. And the news are reporting on it, and he's trying to keep it away from his wife, Aunt Petunia, because she is the sister of Harry Potter's mom, if you didn't know. Mr. Dumbledore, good old Dumbledore, he appears at the end of the street. He puts out his little putter-outer, which, if you know, shows it removes all the lights from the lampposts around the street, making it dark. Talks to the cat, who then transforms into a woman, who we come to know as Professor McGonagall. Good old Minerva. And basically everyone is out, all the wizards are out celebrating. They're pretty much making themselves known to the Muggle world. So, how is the boy getting here, Dumbledore? And Dumbledore says Hagrid's bringing him. She says, you think it's wise to trust Hagrid with something so important as this? And Dumbledore says, I would trust Hagrid with my life. And, his ears must have been burning, shows up on his flying motorcycle, which he then talks about how young Sirius Black has given it to him. And he has good old little baby Harry with him. And they kind of mention that there's a bolt of lightning on his forehead as well. And then Hagrid gets all emotional. He's like, can I say goodbye? And Dumbledore's like, this isn't forever. In the movie doesn't really start with Dursley going through his work day. It really starts off with Dumbledore at the end of the street, with the lights, and then talking to McGonagall, which I would trust Hagrid with my life was in it as well. So it was pretty up to snuff with the first chapter, which is always kind of just cool. I mean, I get you don't really need to showcase Dursley right off rip. They don't really, not to get ahead of myself, but Dursleys don't get a lot of screen time in this one as much as they do in the book to kind of showcase like the abuse that they give and how they treat Harry. So, but otherwise it was basically quoted. Nearly 10 years later, it kind of just, fast forwards to showcasing, Harry being woken up by his aunt, like knocking on the door. He's like, hey, wake up, wake up. He's in this little cupboard. It does mention that Harry has inquired about his scar on his forehead, and basically their family's response was, when your parents and you got in a car accident. And then it kind of goes into how Harry's helping set up breakfast, and Dudley, counting his presents, his face, he's like 36, that's 2 less than last year. And I love this scene. He's gonna have a little Dudley fit. And Aunt Petunia obviously kind of catch that and is like, and we'll buy you 2 more presents while we're out today. How's that, Pumpkin? 2 more presents, is that all right? And Dudley's like thought for a moment. It looked like hard work. Finally he said, so I'll have 30 39 sweetums. So basically they kind of go into that, and they were like, what do we do with Harry? We don't want him to come with us to the zoo. And Dudley's throwing a fit after they were like, well, we kind of have to, like, my family's out of town. They also don't like the boy. Also Mrs. Figs, if you know, you know. She's not available. She just, I believe, had like surgery. Yeah, broke her leg. So she's not available, who typically babysits Harry when the family does things without him. And so he began doing his fake tantrum, but it ended up being like, all right, we'll just bring him along and just don't get in the way and stuff. Like, be quiet, kid. So they go to the zoo, and in this book or whatever, they have Pierce, which is Dudley's friend, who's also a bully and part of Dudley's gang. They also go with him, so they're kind of just picking on Harry as well. So they came across the snake, and they were being super obnoxious, you know, banging on the glass, trying to get Vernon to bang on the glass too, to kind of get the snake to acknowledge, but it seemed like he was asleep. And then they kind of wandered off. Harry was like, and basically just talks to the snake. Snake acknowledges him, and they kind of have a conversation where it's like, oh, you know, I get it. You know, you're trapped there too. To find out the snake was also bred in captivity, so he hasn't really experienced the outside world and all of this stuff. Pierce gets wind of this, calls Dudley over. Dudley pushes Harry out of the way, all this stuff, and then was leaning up against the glass, and then basically all that happened next was the glass disappeared, freaking everyone out. Snake comes out of the cage and is continuing to slink away and saying thanks to Harry. And then carrying on. So everyone was super confused why the glass disappeared and all of this stuff. And at that point, Vernon just kind of freaked out and was like, go to your cupboard, no meals. Essentially, you're grounded, like, get out of my face. And yeah, that is the end of the chapter 2. So in the movie, pretty much about the same. There's a lot of things that were kept out. So there was the present scene that was included. It kind of just went straight to that, where it started that scene with Petunia banging on the cupboard, Dudley bouncing on the stairs or whatever, waking up and annoying Harry. It's Dudley's birthday, Harry's making breakfast, and then they go to the zoo without Pierce. There's no friend there, so that's kind of a different discrepancy or difference between the two. On top of that, they go to the snake. Dudley's pressed up against it. All of a sudden, you know, the window disappears, or the glass disappears. Dudley falls in, it gets out and says thanks, slithers away, and then the window or the glass comes back up and traps Dudley in the snake's cage. So that's kind of how it is, a little bit different, and basically it ends in the same way of being like, you're grounded, get out of my face. So on to chapter 3. This is kind of where, you know, essentially Harry's been punished. He's in his longest punishment ever. Dudley's getting ready for his new private school, the smeltings or whatever, so he's getting some stuff like his smelting stick or whatever in his gray uniform. And they're also, Harry basically comes into the kitchen and finds Aunt Petunia doing something weird with the sink, to find out she is dyeing all of Dudley's old clothes gray for the school uniform. And Harry, kind of low-key being a savage, was like, oh, I didn't realize it had to be so wet. But essentially it was like, go get the mail. Harry goes and grabs the mail because, you know, Dudley refuses to do so. And Harry finds that he has one for him. And it's like, Mr. H. Potter, the cupboard under the stairs, 4 Privet Drive, Little Winging, Surrey. So he brings all the mail in and he starts opening it at the table. Dudley catches on as well. And everyone's up in arms about it. They tear the mail away from him. They see that it's attention to the cupboard under the stairs, so they get super paranoid, saying like, oh my god, someone's watching, they know where we put him, all these things. And they read the letter. Basically they just start gaslighting Harry, being like, this isn't for you, this isn't your letter. And Harry's like, no, it is, it's literally to my attention. And it was like, don't ask questions. And basically it was like, you know what, you're getting too big for it, for the cupboard, you know, we're gonna move you upstairs to the second room or whatever. And so it's like, basically get all your shit and move it upstairs. It's 4 things basically. And Harry enjoys being in bed even though all of Dudley's stuff clutters the room. But everyone the next day was like super quiet, and just like Dudley was not used to not having his attention on him. And he starts like, just being annoying with his smelting stick. And then basically more mail comes, and it's basically attention to Mr. H. Potter, the smallest bedroom for Privet Drive. And everyone goes up in arms again. And then Harry's like, okay, I have a plan. I'm gonna wake up super early next morning. He goes downstairs the next morning and steps on Uncle Vernon, who is asleep at the foot of the door, trapping the mail. So basically that did not work out. Later on, Vernon, he basically mails the mail slot of the door shut. And then on Friday, more letters show up. Uncle Vernon just stays home. He's burning all the letters. On Saturday, more letters show up. Hidden inside each of the 24 eggs that their very confused milkman had handed Aunt Petunia through the living room window. Uncle Vernon is in a tizzy. He is like doing the most to not get these letters inside the house or to Harry. He sits down at breakfast on Sunday morning and was like, no post on Sundays.
Fine day, Sunday. In my opinion, best day of the week.
No damn letters today. And then something came down the kitchen chimney, which was a bunch more letters as well. So basically at this point, Uncle Vernon's like, I want you all back here in 5 minutes and to leave. We're going to just pack some clothes, no arguments. And Dudley's like, I can't pack my VCR and my TV with me? What do you mean? Vernon takes him to a hotel, which, plot twist, not really. He gets more letters. Attention to room 17 at Railview Hotel. And Vernon just loses his mind again, and he's like, okay. And Petunia's like, wouldn't it be better if we just go home, dear? And Dudley's like, Daddy's gone mad. Vernon's like, okay, we're gonna do this. Found the perfect place. He's like, I talked to this boatman. He's gonna lend us his boat. There's gonna be a storm forecast for tonight, and we're gonna go row on this boat out to this island where this shack is, basically. And there's gonna be a storm, so there will be no letters. So, alas, that's what they do. At that time, it's Harry's birthday eve, and he's using Dudley's watch, who's asleep on the couch while he lays on the floor, the cold floor, by the way. And it counts down to his birthday. When he gets down to 1 second to his birthday, the whole shack shivers, and something busted down the door.
Make a wish, Harry.
In the movie, I would say about the same, where it starts with Harry grabbing the mail. They see it, they don't read the letter, but they see who it's from, and they kind of go up in arms. They never move him to the second room. They keep him to his cupboard, at least that we've seen in this scene. There wasn't really any mention of it in the movie. Vernon does the most. He nails up the mailbox. He burns the letters. Nothing to do with the hotel. But they do indeed go out to that shack on the rocks or whatever, and is all giddy about, just it being bad weather. So I would say with that chapter, it was pretty much up to snuff, and just like pretty on par, which is kind of just nice to see. Chapter 4, let me get more comfortable. The door busts down. Vernon's got a rifle in his hands. In comes this big old half giant, if you will, if you know.
Sorry about that.
Who they find out to be Hagrid. And Uncle Vernon is like, I'm armed, all this stuff. Hagrid just goes up and takes the gun and twists it into a knot. And basically it's just like, get out of my face, maybe make a cup of tea.
You great prune.
He immediately recognizes Harry and was like, Harry, last time I saw you, you was only a baby. You look a lot like your dad, but you've got your mom's eyes. And Vernon's trying to hold strong and be like, you're breaking and entering. And then anyways, Harry, happy birthday to you. Here's a cake. I brought it myself, and I think I made it myself. And was like, I'm Hagrid, by the way. I'm the keeper of the keys and grounds at Hogwarts. And then was asking about the tea again. He bent down, poofed there was fire with his umbrella. Grizzlies are just like clambered up in this corner away from Hagrid, just freaking out. Hagrid starts cooking some breakfast, getting some sausages, and then he finds out the Dursleys haven't told him shit. Really have not told him shit. And basically Hagrid's like, yeah, but you know about your mom and dad. You must know about your mom and dad. I mean, they're famous. You're famous. And Harry's like, what? My parents were famous, were they? And he turns to Harry and is like, Harry, you're a wizard.
You're a wizard, Harry.
Hagrid hands him the school letter, which he reads, and then Harry gets mad because he realizes that they always knew that he was a wizard, and Aunt Petunia goes on a tangent, was like, knew? Of course we knew, like my freaking sister is one, and she went and dated that Potter kid, and left and got married and had you, and of course I knew you'd be the same, just as strange, just as abnormal, and then if you please, she went and got herself blown up, and we got landed with you. So she goes on a tangent, rips into Harry for no freaking reason. Harry's like, you told me there was a car crash. Hagrid loses his mind. A car crash? No, like they were killed. He kind of drops some lore. So there's this wizard who went bad, as bad as you could go, worse than worse. His name was Harry. Hagrid gulped, but no words came out. Could you write it down? Harry suggested. Nah, can't spell it. All right, Voldemort. Vernon kind of just lays into Hagrid about like the old fool, like I'm not paying for some crackpot old fool to teach him magic tricks, and Hagrid loses his mind. He's like, never insult Albus Dumbledore in front of me. And then he swish and flicked and gave Dudley a little pigtail. And then he kind of gets a little bit more background of Hagrid and who he is, and kind of a little bit of him, where he mentions, you know, oh, well, like I was at Hogwarts myself, but I got expelled. To tell you the truth, in me third year, they snapped me wand in half and everything, but Dumbledore let me stay on as gamekeeper. Great man. Harry tried to prod a little bit more about that, and Hagrid's like, oh, let's talk more later or whatever. We got things to do. So the end of that chapter. So in the movie, it's a little bit different than in this chapter, where obviously it starts with Hagrid bending a rifle up instead of tying it in a knot. And then on top of that, there wasn't any drop about Voldemort. There was a little bit about the family, very small about Harry's parents. And then it turns into, you know, don't insult Albus Dumbledore in front of me. Like that was also in the movie as well. And in terms of the pigtail happened while Dudley was eating the cake, which didn't happen in the book. So that was kind of a difference between the two, which, you know, whatever. Either way, pigtail. Thought it was hilarious. So that was kind of the biggest difference between the two in terms of that chapter, where we still really haven't heard anything about Voldemort. No mention of him yet at this point in the movie. Really just kind of barely still touching on Harry. We didn't get any lore of Hagrid either. We just kind of know like, hey, he's gamekeeper of Hogwarts, and oh, Hogwarts is a magic. You're also a wizard, Harry. And here's your letter. So that was kind of the end of that at this point in the movie. All right, well, now we kind of get to the fun part. So this chapter 5 is Diagon Alley, and so basically Harry and Hagrid, they go off together in an adventure. Harry's like, oh my god, this wasn't a dream, this was real. I'm so excited. And I'm like, I freaking wish. I so wish. I'm still looking for my Hogwarts letter. If anyone's seen it, please let me know. Please. So they go out and he's like, oh, well, first, you know, here's your list of things that we need to do. Harry's like, so like, can we get all of this in London? And Hagrid's like, if you know where to go. So basically Harry's like, I don't know how to pay for this. You know, I don't have any money. And Hagrid's like, oh, like, you know, we got to go to Gringotts for that. You know, don't worry. Like, you think your parents left you without anything? Like, we got to go grab your money from there. They go to the Leaky Cauldron. The bartender's like, hey, you want your usual? And Hagrid's like, can't today, sir. Like, I'm on official Hogwarts business. And that's when everyone kind of realizes, oh my gosh, this is Harry Potter. And everyone comes up to him. That's where he meets Quirrell for the first time, which I thought it was interesting. Where it says here, it's like, Potter, stammered Professor Quirrell, grasping Harry's hand. Can't tell you how pleased I am to meet you. Which, keep that in mind, like, they're shaking hands. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a potential plot hole. So keep that in mind. So he's meeting everyone. Anyways, so they go through, they find the brick wall. He does this little magic combo. The wall kind of disappears, and into Diagon Alley they go. And first things first, they go to Green Gods, where he has his first time exposure to the goblins, who are a little bit snotty, but that is what it is. And Hagrid goes up to him and he's like, you know, hey, gotta get into Mr. Harry Potter's safe. Do you have the key? Hands him the key. And he's like, and also while we're here, official Hogwarts business, but I got a letter here from Professor Dumbledore, said Hagrid, importantly, throwing out his chest. It's about the you-know-what in Vault 713. And the goblin's like, yeah, gotcha. Here's this goblin, grip hook, he'll take you down. So they go down, they enjoy that roller coaster of a ride to get to their vault, which honestly, I don't think I would do well. I've also learned that I just cannot tolerate roller coasters very well. I get super motion sickness. Like, I feel like I would need to take a Dramamine before I go to Green Gots every time I had to go get money from my bank. Like, girl cannot handle the motions. So, oh God. They end up to Harry's vault and they find out that Harry's got money. He is loaded. He is a rich bitch. They end up grabbing some money from Harry's vault and they go visit Vault 713, which Harry was like, that's weird, when it opens up and it's like the small package and it's brown. It's just super easy. Hagrid just quickly throws it in his pocket and like thinks nothing more of it. From there, they kind of go back out to the Diagon Alley and they're like, hey, like, let's, first things first, like, let's go ahead and go get your robes. But first, if you're okay with it, I'm going to go get a drink. Like, I did not handle the ride very well, and I feel like I would be right there with Hagrid on that. Harry goes in and gets his robes fitted, and that's where he bumps into a snotty little boy who we've come to know as Draco. And, you know, they continue around Diagon Alley getting, you know, some shopping done, getting their books. And then Hagrid's like, just gotta get your wand. He sends Harry to Ollivander's, an experience where he tries a few and it's immediately like, absolutely not, wand is not for you. And Ollivander's, he's like, I'm just curious, like, try this wand. Works out really well. And he's like, well, how curious, how very curious. And then Harry's like, what's curious? Ollivander is like, I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter, every single wand. It so happens that the phoenix whose tail feather is in your wand gave another feather, just one other. It is very curious indeed that you should be destined for this wand when its brother gave you that scar. And at the end of that, and he's like, oh, okay, I don't really know what that means other than it's Voldemort who killed my parents. And so after that, Hagrid hands him, you know, his owl Hedwig, and also gives him his little ticket and was like, hey, this is your ticket to get on the train. It's platform 9 3/4, 1st of September, King's Cross. It's all on your ticket. Any problems with the Dursleys, send me a letter with your owl. So in this chapter with the movie, we do have like the leaky cauldron scene where, you know, you go in and he's like, you know, I'm on official Hogwarts business. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, that's Harry Potter. So they all kind of meet him and stuff. Quirrell does not shake hands with Harry, which I thought was interesting. Again, keep that in mind, where in the book they shook hands, but in the movie they did not. And they continue on, you know, through the brick wall to Diagon Alley. They go to Gringotts. They ride that roller coaster. They visit Harry's, you know, vault with all his coin. And they also visited Vault 713. However, Hagrid, when he handed the letter to the goblin, he didn't say what vault. You kind of just found out by looking at the vault number when they showed up to it. I'm here about you-know-what in the you-know-where. So that's a little different. The robe scene with Malfoy, or, you know, the snotty kid, did not happen. That whole robe scene never actually happened, but moved to Ollivander's and that Ollivander experience, which I feel like was pretty quoted between the book and from the book to the movie, where he tried a few and it was like instantly no, and then the one was like curious, this worked out really well. And the quote I read, I'm pretty sure that was exactly what was said in the movie as well. And then Hagrid had the owl as well, Hedwig too. And then from that scene, they go straight to the train station. So that's another transition that is different from the book. For the next chapter, Harry spends one more month with the Dursleys, which turns out was not very fun. Like, hey, can you take me to King's Cross, to drop me off at the train? Good luck, kid, and just kind of dumped him. And Harry was getting super stressed because the train was about to leave. It's almost 11 o'clock, and he comes across a bunch of redheads that had also owls as well. Harry just goes up to them, and it was like, hey, how do I get onto the platform? Mrs. Weasley, that we come to know, it's the Weasleys. He was like, yeah, you just run straight at this wall. Don't panic. Don't stop, and don't be scared you'll crash into it. That's very important. He runs in. It was successful. They get onto the train, and he sits with Ron in one of the areas, and Ron kind of alludes to the fact that, they're not exactly made of money, and so he gets a lot of second or hand-me-downs because he's the 5th kid going to Hogwarts as well, so everything's hand-me-down, including this wand. Harry buys a whole bunch of candy, so Harry is nice enough to trade some candy with him, and they're talking about the chocolate frogs, and Harry's like, they're not really frogs, are they? And then Ron's like, no, but see what the card is, Harry unwraps it. He finds out he's got Dumbledore, and then on the back has a little bit of a snippet for Dumbledore. But they kind of just talk about that, and then a girl who we come to know is Hermione. She opens the compartment door and was like, hey, have you looked for, has anyone seen a toad? Neville's lost one. Ron was about to turn Scabbers yellow, so he kind of does his little rhyme, and nothing happens. And then Hermione is so skeptical and was like, are you sure that's a spell? I would know, I've read everything. By the way, I'm Hermione Granger, and you are. And they introduce themselves. And then she left, taking Neville with her. And then shows up Malfoy with his gang. Is like, is it true? They're all saying on the train that Harry Potter's in this compartment, so it's you, isn't it? And was basically saying to Harry, he's like, you'll soon find out some wizarding families are much better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort. I can help you there. And Harry didn't shake his hand, and was like, I think I can tell who the wrong sort are for myself. Thanks. Hermione shows back up. Basically, we're here, get ready, put your robes on. Essentially, they all round up to meet up to Hagrid. They get onto the boat, so it is Ron, Harry, and Neville to a boat. And they all, go towards Hogwarts. Hagrid. So in this chapter, it kind of veers off a little bit more, where, again, it starts this scene where Hagrid takes Harry to the train station and then kind of just leaves him alone. Harry in the movie does ask the guard, and the guard's like, I don't know, you're on your own, kid. Bumps into the Weasleys. Mrs. Weasley's so helpful and was like, yeah, just run right to this, brick wall and don't be scared. And so he does. And then they all load up, and Ron's like, can I sit with you? So it's just those two in the compartment. You'll see Hermione come through and be like, hey, have you seen a toad? Neville's lost one or whatever, and then sees that Ron's about to do magic, the yellow spell, which doesn't work out. And then she shows up and she's like, yeah, I've been reading, my spell's been working fine. And she does the Reparo on Harry's glasses. And then they also have the chocolate frogs as well. And in the movie, Harry buys the whole cart and shares with Ron, and they eat the chocolate frog. He gets the Albus Dumbledore magic card, but there's no writing on the back of it. It's just a little face card, and that's it. There's no sign of Malfoy that shows up. That actually happens in the Sorting Hat area. That whole scene is pretty much quoted, but it happens later on. We don't see Neville initially with the toad. We don't hear him on the platform either. We don't really see any mention of him until the Sorting Hat. They all do get on the boat, but unfortunately in the movie it is Hermione and Neville are actually on 2 different boats, not with Harry and Ron. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I'm like, why don't you just put them all together? Like, they were meant to be a quad. Why are we making them a trio? So the next chapter is the Sorting Hat. So they all show up and it's Professor McGonagall, and she's like, line up kids, you know, we're about to do the sorting. And the first years are freaking out, standing there, you know, looking like lost puppies. Professor McGonagall brings out the hat, and the hat breaks out into a song. And after that, they just kind of be like, okay, we're gonna get right onto it. Ron was like, so we've just got to try on the hat, Ron whispered to Harry. I'll kill Fred. He was going on about wrestling a troll. So he absolutely got hazed by his brother. So then they go one by one, pretty much alphabetical order through all the first years. You know, Hermione gets Gryffindor, Ron and Harry also get Gryffindor, Draco gets Slytherin, and Neville also gets Gryffindor as well.
Better be Gryffindor!
And so everyone was pumped on Gryffindor that they got Potter. Harry makes eye contact with Snape at the teacher's table, who's talking to Quirrell. And that's when he had a hot pain shoot through his scar. And that's when he's like, oh, that's a little uncomfortable. You know, who's that teacher? And Percy's like, yeah, that's Snape. He's, you know, in charge of potions and all of that. Dumbledore stands back up and was like, hey, there are some rules. You know, Forbidden Forest is forbidden for everyone. Stay off the 3rd corridor. And then they're like, let's break out into the Hogwarts song. And then when they were all done, Percy kind of leads them up towards Gryffindor Tower and just kind of mentions the password to get into the Gryffindor common room is Pig Snout. And that is it for that chapter. So for the Sorting Hat, in the movie, we do see, you know, they all kind of like group together and they line up with Professor McGonagall. And obviously there's no singing for the Hogwarts song, and for the Sorting Hat doesn't sing either. And we have that Malfoy interaction that we read in the previous chapter occur in this time, pretty much almost verbatim, but the same gist as well. And they don't go in alphabetical order, of course, for the movie. You know, got to get the main characters sorted. Of course, Neville wasn't really mentioned, but, you know, Dumbledore talks about, you know, don't go into the 3rd corridor and the Forbidden Forest is off limits. And then the whole Sir Headless Nick situation, when it was like, you're nearly headless, how could you be nearly headless? That was Hermione saying it, where in the book it's Seamus. So that was kind of just something subtle different. And, you know, obviously in the movie, Sir Nearly Headless Nick was a little bit more joyous on showing off his battle scar, if you will, where in the book he was not pleased to be known as that. Oh, and I forgot to mention the password in the movie is also Cabbage Draconis, I think is what it was. Why was it not Pig Snout? Why did they just not keep that? That's what I want to know. Anyways, for chapter 8, the bit essentially in the book, they go for, you know, the first day of class. Harry just basically, you know, realizing he's not as far behind as he was feeling, and they find out they're going to potions with Slytherin as well. It turned out to be a bully session for Snape, where he kind of just pop quizzes Harry, and Harry's like, I have no idea the answers to any of these questions. And Hermione's like, I do, like, please pick on me, like, I'm raising my hand. And so, you know, Malfoy is getting the best kick out of it, being like, oh yeah, Harry's so dumb. Harry and Ron go and visit Hagrid, and Harry found a newspaper laying under the table, the Daily Prophet, and it talks about Gringotts break-in, the latest break-in. And Harry mentioned, I remember Ron telling him on the train that someone tried to rob Gringotts, which I forgot to mention to you as well, that was initially happened same day that Harry went to Diagon Alley and to the bank and all of that. So that was the first time we heard about the break-in and the robbery attempt, was the same day as that. And then we're now seeing it in the Daily Prophet under Hagrid's table. And then Harry tried to prod Hagrid about it and be like, hey, like, it might have been happening while we were there. And Hagrid's like, I'm not really going to answer that. and basically was like, here's some rock cakes. It was like, yeah, thanks for hanging out. So really this chapter, not a whole lot happened. Like we do in the movie, we see a lot of snippets of, you know, Professor McGonagall, Harry and Ron are running late. Professor McGonagall's little moment of being like, I'll turn one of you into a pocket watch so at least you guys can be on time, or a map so you guys aren't lost. And then we do see the potions being, you know, a bully session as well. We don't see anything about the melting cauldron or the boils of Neville, but we see a lot of the bullying of Snape, pop quizzing Harry, and Hermione's like having her hand raised, knowing the answer, but Snape refusing to call on her. And we do see a lot of that. We don't see a letter from Hagrid. Kind of just doesn't really touch on that. And I believe they just found like the Daily Prophet Gringotts thing just when they were eating at the table. So there wasn't really like a whole lot that matched with the book in this chapter specifically. On to chapter 9. Basically it goes into where Harry's like, oh my god, Draco is the worst, the absolute worst, and that they're going to be taking flying lessons, Slytherin and Gryffindor together. And he's like, just what I wanted, you know, to make a fool of myself on a broomstick in front of Malfoy. But Ron was like, well, Malfoy's always going on about how he's always riding and all this stuff, and that he's doing a lot of flying and he's going to be, you know, great. Come to find out that like Hermione and Neville have also been super nervous about flying because they've never touched a broomstick. Hermione's like trying to read all the books to get tips on flying. So they're at, I think it was breakfast, and Neville gets a small package from his grandmother, and it turns out to be the Remembrall. Oh, Gran knows I forget things. This tells you if there's something you forgot to do. Look, you hold it tight like this, and if it turns red, oh, because the Remembrall has suddenly glowed scarlet, you've forgotten something. And then Neville's like, well, trying to remember what it is he's exactly forgotten. At that afternoon, they go to the flying lessons. Madam Hooch is kind of explaining, you know, like, everyone stand by the broomstick, come on, you know, and you just basically hold out your hand and say up. And Harry shoots straight up as if, you know, he was made for this. Hermione's just simply rolled over. Neville's didn't even move at all. Once they all kind of figured it out, Madam Hooch was like, get on the brooms, teach you how to mount, and you're gonna just go up a few feet and then come straight back down. On my whistle, 3, 2, 1, but Neville takes off. He pushes up and he goes too high. And then it just basically says that he essentially just falls off the broom and crashes down and breaks his wrist. Madam Hooch is like, come on, like, let's get you to the hospital wing. So she turns to the rest of the class and was like, you leave those brooms where they are. Malfoy finds the Remembrall on the grass, and he snatches it. Harry picks up on it, and Harry was like, give it to me. Malfoy's just like becoming taunting, gets on the broom and takes off. And then Harry also does the same thing, and Hermione tries to stop him, but he doesn't listen.
What an idiot.
He catches up to Malfoy and realizing like he's pretty natural at flying on the broom, and he basically was like, give it here or I'll knock you off the broom. And Malfoy threw the ball high in the air. Harry, you know, flies through the air and catches it. And then he hears his name called out and find out that it's Professor McGonagall running towards them. She's like, you could have broken your neck, like, come with me, Potter. And everyone thinks that Harry is in trouble. Harry goes with Professor McGonagall, following him through the castle. Professor McGonagall goes to a different class, Flitwig's class, and was like, hey, can I borrow wood, please? Oliver Wood came out, and Professor McGonagall was basically like, hey, found you a seeker. Later on, Ron is like in disbelief, was like, you're joking. And then Malfoy rolls up and was like, having a last meal, Potter. When is the train going back for Muggles? And then Harry was like, you're a lot braver now that you're on the ground, got your little friends with you. And then Malfoy's like, I'll challenge you to a wizard's duel tonight. Wands only, no contact. And he's like, midnight, all right, we'll meet you in the trophy room. That's always unlocked. Excuse me. They hear a voice and they both look up and it's Hermione. And then Ron is like, can't a person eat in peace in this place? Ron is such a hater. I'm like, bro, this is your wife, your future wife, and you are just hating pretty much off rip. And like, you know, pretty much throughout the series, but we'll get to that. And she is basically scolding him, is like, don't break any rules, like you mustn't do that. Harry's like, it's really none of your business. And they're basically like boys clubbing her. So at the end of the day, you know, Neville's still in the hospital wing and everyone's asleep. And then Ron's like, oh, it's 11:30, like, let's go. They pull on their bathrobes and they're about to leave the common room and a light turns on. It's Hermione. And then she's basically like, I almost told your brother, Percy, he's a prefect. And Harry couldn't believe, you know, what was going on. So they're basically like, just come on, Hermione, you know? And so they all just, the three of them go. They hear a Miss Norris kind of strolling around, but they thought it was Miss Norris, but it wasn't. It was Neville, and it turns out he was curled up fast on the floor in front of them in the corridor, where he was sleeping, and then he jerked awake as they got there, and he's like, thank goodness you found me. I've been out here for hours. I couldn't remember the new password to get into bed. And then everyone's like, the password's Big Snout, like, keep your voice down. Also, it won't help you, like, the fat lady's gone off somewhere. So they go to the trophy room, and Malfoy and Crabbe aren't there past midnight. You know, maybe he's chickened out. And then they hear a voice that wasn't Malfoy, and it turns out, you know, it's Filch and Mrs. Norris. And so Harry was like, let's get out of here, like, come this way. And so they start running, and then they're like, I think we lost him. And then Hermione's like, I told you. And they're like, we need to get back to the tower. So they're trying to like find the way around, and you know, they bump into Peeves, who's just an annoying ghost, which we will not get into. But they bump into, you know, a locked door, and they hear Filch running as far as they can because Peeves started yelling that students are out of bed. And so Hermione, you know, unlocks the door, and they all go in there, and they're like, oh, okay. Like, they wait until Filch leaves, and you know, at this time, they're like, okay, he thinks the door's locked, you know, I think we'll be okay. And then I guess Neville's like on tugging at Harry's bathrobe for a minute and was like, what? And they turned around and they saw the three-headed dog. We'll take Filch over this dog for sure. And so they open the door, they go out into the corridor, and they just start running back to the tower. And then Hermione's like, didn't you guys even look? Like, did you see what he was on? Like a trap door? And they're like, oh, I like did not see that. Harry was like, oh, maybe that's where that package is. So in the movie, for this scene with the Quidditch, or with the flying lessons, it is with Gryffindor and Slytherin. And I feel like with the initial up, when they were like up for the broomstick, like it did showcase that, you know, Harry's went up immediately, and then like Hermione's didn't. And then they mounted, and Neville's took off. Of course, his scene was a little bit more than what was in the book, where he flew around, was super out of control, and then he fell from his broom and got like snagged on that statue and then fell and broke his wrist, where in the book it really didn't. He just kind of like fell off his broom. In the movie as well, like Malfoy grabs the Remembrall, Harry sees it, Harry chases Malfoy and basically was like, give it back. Malfoy yeets that thing, and Harry catches it. Professor McGonagall sees it by her window and like basically is like, Potter, like come down, everyone thinks he's in trouble. Talked to Wood as well and was like, here's your new seeker, you know, found him. And basically at that point was like, let's keep this on the DL. But in the next scene, it was basically these ghosts were just like openly talking about how Harry is the new seeker and like he's basically the youngest seeker in the century and all this stuff. Hermione was like, you guys got to see this. She brings them to the trophy room, where it shows like the trophy where it says James Potter is seeker, and then off to the side you can also see McGonagall's trophy as well, being on the team as well. And then from there, the trio are walking back to Gryffindor Tower, and the staircases change and they kind of get lost, and that's when they get chased down by Filch or whatever, and they bump into the locked door and they like open it, and that's when they when it's Ron kind of tugging, be like, hey, like turn around, Harry, and that's when they bump into Fluffy, or the three-headed dog. And so in this scene, or in the movies, like Neville's not really a part of it whatsoever. Like they didn't find him outside the common room. He didn't tag along with them. He's still pretty much in the hospital wing for that. and it's just the trio at this point in time. Y'all, I am starting to get so tired, so we might just start speed running this, so please don't blame me if I miss anything, but I feel like I've been sitting here for so long, and we're only at chapter 10. There's 17. So 10 is the Halloween. Harry, Ron, and Hermione are like, oh, like, what's that dog guarding? It's gotta be something super valuable and all of this stuff. All the mail starts coming in, and in drops a very oddly shaped, like a broom, package along with a note for Harry. And basically the note says, do not open the parcel at the table. It contains your Nimbus 2000, but I don't want everyone knowing you've got a broomstick or they'll all want one. Oliver Wood will meet you tonight on the Quidditch field at 7 o'clock for your first training session. Professor McGonagall. So they all like leave the hall quickly to go unwrap it. They bump into Malfoy and his cronies. Professor Flitwick was like, what's going on here, basically, and Malfoy was like, Potter's been sent a broomstick, Professor, said Malfoy quickly, and then Professor Flitwick was like, yes, that's right. And what model is it? Harry was like, a Nimbus 2000, sir. And it's really thanks to Malfoy here that I got it. They go up to the dormitories and they unwrap it. Harry's just kind of anxious to get started. So he meets with Oliver Wood. Oliver Wood's like, let me teach you all about Quidditch. You know, here are the rule, or here's the many players, which I'm not going to get into. So if you don't know, watch the movie. Pretty much par for par, I feel like. And then he's like, here are the balls. These are the rules, essentially, and like this is all you need to do is catch the golden snitch. The longest Quidditch match has lasted is like 3 months. So, the game keeps going until you catch it. Flitwick's class, they are learning Wingardium Leviosa. Ron is jaded AF. He's in a very bad mood because he just got showed up as he tried to like be better than her. As they're walking from class, like he's like, it's no wonder no one can stand her. She's a nightmare, honestly. And then someone knocked into her. They realize it's Hermione, and she's like in tears basically. And then Harry's like, I think she heard you. And later that day, didn't turn up for the next class and wasn't seen all afternoon. The Halloween feast, they basically overheard Parvati Patil telling her friend Lavender that Hermione was crying in the girls' bathroom and wanted to be left alone. And then Quirrell comes sprinting into the hall, and he's like, troll in the dungeons. He sank to the floor and fainted. Everyone's in fucking scrambles. Albus, or Professor Dumbledore, we're on first name basis. Prefects, lead your houses to the dormitories, teachers, come with me. Everyone was like super confused. Harry's like, oh my God, like I just thought Hermione, and Ron's like, what about her? She doesn't know about the troll. So they're like, oh, we better go find her or whatever. So they like slip away, and they see Snape, who's crossing the corridor and disappeared from view. And Harry's like, why isn't he down with the rest of the teachers? They're like, he's heading for the 3rd floor or whatever. And then that's when they like picked up on the smell, and they're like, oh my God, the troll is near. See the troll through the door, the key's in the lock. We could lock it in. And Ron's like, that's a good idea. So they go and they lock the door, locking the troll inside, and they're like, yes, basically chest bumping each other. That's when they hear her scream, and they realize, oh my God, we just locked the troll in with Hermione. So they go back and they unlock the door and they rush in, fighting it. Hermione's like kind of like hiding from it. Harry just jumped on it and managed to like get his arms around the troll's neck. Harry just basically sticks his wand up the troll's nose, and Ron was like, I got this, and he says Wingardium Leviosa and gets the club of the troll up and drops it on the troll's head. Teachers roll in, and Professor McGonagall is like, what on earth is going on here? And she's like, you lucky you weren't killed. Like, why weren't you in the dormitory? And like everyone was like, I don't know what's. Hermione was like, please, like they were looking for me. She's like, I went looking for the troll because I thought I could deal with it on my own, because I've read all about them. Professor McGonagall was like, well, that, you're a foolish girl, but Professor Dumbledore will be informed of this. So they all go back to the dormitory, and that's where they bump into Hermione, who's kind of loitering nearby, and was like, they're just super awkward. And that moment on, Hermione Granger became their friend. this point on, they're besties. Like, they're an official trio. In the movie, for Harry Gets the Nimbus 2000, they just like rip it open on the table out for the world to see. There was no like parcel or like letter be like, hey, like don't open it here, like go somewhere else, even though you can clearly tell what it is. You're like, what could be under that wrapping? He gives, I believe, a nod to Dumbledore, where in this case it was actually McGonagall that kind of gave it to him. Then it fast forwards to Flitwick's class, where again it's par for the movie in the book, and then Ron's a snobby after class as they're walking together and was like, I don't know, you know, she's just a nightmare and like she's got no friends. And Hermione hears it, pushes past them, is crying. They don't see Hermione for the feast, the Halloween feast, and then they're like, okay, you know, oh, I hear Hermione's in the bathroom, you know, and Quirrell runs in, was like, there's a troll in the dungeon, faints. Chaos ensues, which still is on par for it. They're running, and, you know, Harry and Ron like slip away because they're like, oh my god, Hermione. And so they like go, and they don't pass Snape, or they don't see Snape slipping off to the corridor. They don't see him. Oh, and they don't even lock the door or attempt to lock the door. They just go in and start fighting, which the fight scene is pretty much the same as the movie. The teachers come in, you know, and they're like, what is going on? Hermione bails them out and is like, it's my fault. It's my fault. And then Harry sees Snape's leg that's cut. And Snape sees Harry, you know, see him and like hides his leg or whatever. In the book, that doesn't happen. We don't see that until I think this next coming chapter. Spoiler alert. That is kind of the only difference for that chapter. So for chapter 11, they entered in November, you know, it's getting cold. Quidditch, first game, Gryffindor versus Slytherin. You know, they're all so nervous. Harry was feeling super angsty and was like reading the Quidditch Through the Ages. That was taken away by Snape earlier time. I can't remember, but he was trying to see if he can find that book so he can like take his mind off the Quidditch game. So he goes to Snape's office, and it's like knocking or whatever, and then he's like, oh, maybe like he's not there, and maybe he just like left it in there. So he like opens the door, sees Snape and Filch looking at Snape's leg. He tries to like close the door again, gets caught. Snape is like, get out, and like he just runs. And then Ron's like, did you get it? Like, what's the matter? And then Harry told him. And then he's like, you know what this means? Like, he tried to get past the three-headed dog at Halloween. That's where he was going when we saw him. I bet my broomstick he let the troll in to make a diversion. Hermione's eyes were wide. She's like, no, he wouldn't. I know he's not very nice, but he wouldn't try and steal something Dumbledore was keeping safe. And they're like, okay, whatever. The next morning, you know, it is game day. Madam Hooch is refereeing, so they are like flying around. So Hagrid joins in on them, and all I can say is Lee Jordan's commentary in this whole chapter for this game is just so funny, because he's always pushing the envelope, and Professor McGonagall's like, stop, like, Jordan. So like there's so many, like I would quote one, but I honestly don't know which one would be the best one. So that one was just, it was just so enjoyable to read his commentary and his on the game, and you know, it's just being a little spicy with it, you know, digging at the Slytherin for it. Basically, you know, Harry's just kind of floating around, and then all of a sudden Harry's broom starts acting up, and it's all over the place, and Hagrid's like, I don't know what's going on, like why is broom acting that way? And then Hermione is like, give me the binoculars, and then she's like, I knew it, like Snape, look, and like they had him look, and Snape's making full-blown eye contact with Harry and like muttering something. Hermione finds her way across towards Snape and basically sets his robe on fire. Chaos ensues in that area, you know, bumps everyone, disappears again, and then it's like Neville was also with them, by the way, which, oh, Neville is so underrated. So underrated. The movies did him such a disservice. Like, he's all over in this book. Like, they were meant to be a quad, and I don't know why they didn't make him a trio, or why they made him a trio in the movies. Like, he doesn't become like useful, I think you can say, until like the 5th movie, which that was just a tangent, but I was just like, I had to get that off my chest. Like, Neville is so underrated. I love him so much. He's just doing his best. Anyways, back to this. So basically, Harry gets control of his broom again, and he's got the snitch in his mouth, so he won the game.
looks like he's gonna be sick.
As I was saying, like, you know, Ron was explaining it was Snape, and Hermione and I saw him. He was cursing your broomstick. He wouldn't take his eyes off you. And Hagrid's like, that's rubbish. Like, why would Snape do something like this? And the trio was like, oh, all right, like, let's tell him the truth. So I found out something about him. He tried to get past the three-headed dog on Halloween. It bit him. We think he was trying to steal whatever it's guarding. And then Hagrid dropped his teapot. Sorry, I forgot to mention, like, this was at Hagrid's house later on. And he's like, how do you know about Fluffy? And they're like, Fluffy? And he's like, yeah, he's mine. Bought him off a Greek chappie I met in the pub last year. I lent him to Dumbledore to guard the... Harry's like, yeah? He's like, no, don't ask me anymore. That's top secret. He's like, but Snape's gonna steal it. And he's like, you forget that dog, you forget what it's guarding. That's between Professor Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel. Do you remember that name? Everyone was like, oh, so there's someone called Nicholas Flamel involved, is there? And Hagrid was furious with himself. So essentially in the movie, we don't see the leg injury with Filch and Snape. We saw that previously with the troll. Like, we kind of saw it at that time, so there wasn't any information about that. And Lee Jordan's commentary, like, it was good, but they were leaving out, like, his saucy bits where he was, like, digging on Slytherin, and he was just making funny commentary, and, like, Professor McGonagall was sitting right next to him in the movie and all of that. And then in the movie, you also see, you know, Quirrell is standing right next to, or like right behind Snape, pretty much. But Hagrid was with Hermione and Ron. So, like, he was there during that Quidditch game, and, like, he mentioned, you know, something about that, but he did later on spill the beans between Fluffy and Nicholas Flamel. So that chapter, not a whole lot happens because it's mostly just Quidditch and all of that, and, like, the broomstick and issues and stuff like that, but it was, like, pretty much on, other than just some of the events kind of got swapped around a little bit. On to the next. So in this next chapter, it's Christmas time, and the trio is in the library just kind of looking for about Nicholas Flamel. Like, you know, Hermione's going back to her family for the Christmas holiday. They find out Ron is staying, in the Weasley twins, you know, and Percy are all staying. You know, Ron and Harry are, you know, Gryffindor table teaching Harry how to play wizard's chess. Ron's set was very old and battered, like everything else he owned. It had once belonged to someone in his family. However, old chessmen weren't a drawback at all. Ron knew them so well, he'd never had trouble getting them to do what he wanted. However, Harry played with chessman Seamus Finnegan had lent him, and they didn't trust him at all. He wasn't a very good player, and they kept shouting different bits of advice at him, which was confusing. Like, don't send me there. Can't you see his knight? Send him. We can afford to lose him. So I love that the chess sets are like talking about, they're like, no, that's not the move you want to do. Please don't do that. Don't sacrifice me. Sacrifice that guy. He's the one that can, you know, we can afford. Christmas rolls around. They're like, Merry Christmas. Harry gets a gift from Hagrid. It's a little man-made flute, or handmade flute, super kind of thoughtful. And then Ron gets a sweater, and he's like so upset. He's like, oh, every year she makes me a sweater, and it's always maroon. Oh, I also forgot to mention that obviously Harry got his own Weasley sweater as well. He gets the last, the invisibility cloak, and he's like, there's a note that fell out, and it says, your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well. A very Merry Christmas to you. There was no signature. They end up just hanging out for Christmas, falls asleep. Harry can't really sleep. He gets out of bed, and he's like, oh, like, he puts on the cloak and he sneaks out. He goes to the restricted section in the library, which I forgot to mention before. When they were before Christmas, they mentioned like they searched the library everywhere, and then Harry had kind of a thought. I was like, maybe it's in the restricted section. Can't say that word. And so he goes in with a lamp or whatever, and he's like looking through, and he's like, Flamel, like anywhere, Flamel. And he opens a book that starts screaming. He drops it, totally startled, slides the book back in, but drops his lamp and like shatters. And that's when he hears Filch kind of stumbling around. So he's like running. There was a door that was stood ajar to his left or whatever, and he slipped to find out that there was a mirror. The mirror of Erised. And that's when he finds out, like, he's like looking in there and he's like, oh my God, like there's all these people. There's like 10 people here. Just to find out that it's his parents and like basically multiple generations of his family, the Potters. And then the next day, Ron's like all bothered because he's like, oh, like you could have woken me up. And then Harry's like, well, I'm gonna go back tonight, like come with me. You know, I want you to meet my family. And Ron's like, I would love to see your parents. So they go back that night and they basically, they get back there and Ron's like, oh my God, like, Harry's like, yeah, do you see my parents? And Ron's like, I see it. Like, I'm wearing a badge like Bill used to. I'm holding the house cup and the Quidditch cup. I'm Quidditch captain too. The next day, Harry's kind of just moping around. He's like, oh, you know, like I want to go back. Like, and Ron's like, I don't have a good feeling. Like, don't go back. You know, I'm serious, Harry, don't go. And the third night, like he goes by himself. He's looking at the mirror. He's looking at his family. And someone's like, so back again, Harry. And it's Dumbledore. He just explains the Erised mirror. And he's like, what do you think it is? And Dumbledore is like, give us neither knowledge or truth. Men have wasted away before, entranced by what they have seen, or been driven mad, not knowing if what is real shown is real or even possible. And then he's like, the mirror is going to be moved to a new home, Harry. Like, don't go looking for it again. And then Harry's like, what do you see in the mirror? And then Dumbledore's like, hi? Woolen socks. He's like, one can never have enough socks. So basically in the movie, starting with like searching in the library, that kind of didn't really happen. Like there was mention, and then Hermione's like, you got to check the restriction, like we need to look in the restricted section. So in the movie, it comes off as Hermione having that idea, where in the book, it's actually Harry having that idea of like, maybe we should look in there kind of thing. And then later on, it's playing chess between Ron and Harry. Like the knights aren't talking, which is such a bummer. Like I love the sassiness that the knights or like the chess pieces are giving, because they're like, we don't trust you. Like you can't play us. We don't know who you are. You're not Seamus. So there's like that aspect as well. And then when it came to Christmas, there was no mention of the flute. There was no sign of the flute, but you know, we got the cloak of invisibility and the Weasley sweaters. The twins and Percy were nowhere to be seen really in that. It was just between Harry and Ron. In that first night, Harry goes in, you know, the restricted section of the library. He's looking around, picks out that screaming book, you know, gets startled, drops the lantern or the lamp or whatever. Filch is coming around, and you know, Snape's with him as well, essentially. So you know, that's still the same as the book. Harry's like sneaking away or whatever, trying not to get caught, finds the room, finds the mirror, and discovers it's just his parents, his mom and dad. There's not multiple generations, there's no 10 other people or anything like that. But it's actually in the movie, it's the same night that he goes and wakes Ron up and was like, come with me, come see my parents. And that's when we, you know, see Ron's like, oh, like I'm head boy, I'm holding the cup, I'm Quidditch captain, and all of that. And then it kind of fast forwards to the next time that Harry is sitting in front of the mirror, that Dumbledore spots him, was like, hey, you know, like, don't be hanging around this mirror any longer, you know, it's going to be moved, you know, don't be looking for it. And I thought when I first read this scene, I thought he does get asked in the movie of what he sees in the mirror, and it was like the woolen socks. So I'm like having this weird like thought where I'm like, I swear that happened. And I'm like, maybe it's one of those deleted scenes that are like were removed from the movies. Like I know there's a few of those, but I don't remember what scenes they are. I haven't looked into it or whatever. So like, please let me know if I'm going crazy, because I'm fully convinced that the woolen sock scene was in the movie as well. Like, I swear. So on to the next chapter. You know, it's the start of term, super busy with all the schoolwork and everything like that. Like they're feeling very, you know, busy with all the practices. Harry's practicing a lot of Quidditch. And that's when they find out that Snape's refereeing their next game, which I believe is with Hufflepuff and Gryffindor. And Snape's refereeing, and so everyone in Gryffindor is like defeated by this idea. They're like, he's gonna rig the game, like maybe we shouldn't play. So like they're super torn on that, and at that point Neville comes through the common room, and Gryffindor common room, and has his legs stuck together, which they notice that once is the leg locker curse. Hermione helps him out and like, you know, does the counter curse, and they find out it's Malfoy that did it. And so basically they start, I believe, helping Neville practice the leg locker curse, like, you know, just be like, let's just work on practicing it so that way you can do it too. And then Harry says the sweetest thing, and he's like, you're worth 12 of Malfoy. And that, like, you know, helped Neville out. They were eating chocolate frogs, and that's when they realized, you know, Dumbledore again. He was the first one I ever saw. That's when Harry had like that light bulb moment. He was like, oh my god, I found him, Nicholas Flamel, on the back of Dumbledore's card on the chocolate frogs. So he like pulls it out and is like reading, and then Hermione's like, oh my god. She is looking excited. She's like, stay there. And she comes back with this huge, enormous old book, and she's like, I never thought to look in here. I got this out of the library weeks ago for a bit of light reading. And everyone's like, light? And that's when they like looked him up. It's like, Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Sorcerer's Stone. And then they read all about the Sorcerer's Stones. So kind of leading up to the Quidditch match with Snape refereeing, Ron, Hermione, and Neville take the stands. They were secretly practicing the leg locker curse to use on Snape in case he gets a little shady towards Harry during the game. Hermione's like, don't forget, it's locomotor mortis. God, to think that I would get so tongue twisted trying to say any of these spells. Like, I can't even fucking read them, let alone try and say it in the heat of a moment. Like, that would be crazy. And then in the stands, Malfoy and his cronies are pretty much right behind Hermione, Ron, and Neville, and is taunting them, essentially, and being super annoying. And you know, bullying Neville as well. And then Neville, bless his heart, he turns around and he's like, I'm worth 12 of you, Malfoy. He stammers. Malfoy keeps taunting them, and then he really gets to Ron, and Ron like freaks out and like jumps Malfoy. So they're all fighting. Harry wins the game. He catches the snitch. Game over. You know, later on, like everyone's so happy that he won, and Ron is looking a little battered, but like super pumped that they won as well. You know, Harry's put away his broomstick in the shed. He came across a figure that was kind of floating out from the front steps of the castle. Like, he was pretty much by himself, I believe, towards the Forbidden Forest. So he basically was like, oh my god, I gotta follow him. I gotta follow this creepy cloak. So he gets back on his broomstick and flies towards that way. And he kind of flies above the Forbidden Forest and gets closer, and like jumps onto a tree and like hangs onto a branch and listens in. Below, he finds out it's Snape and with Quirrell, and Snape is kind of just like getting after Quirrell basically. And like Harry later on comes back to the Gryffindor room. Everyone's like partying, and like Hermione's like, where have you been? And basically kind of gave the update that like Malfoy has a black eye. Neville tried to take on Crabbe and Goyle single-handed, but he's still out cold. Poor guy. Bless his heart. And basically Harry's like, let me tell you what I found. Listened in on. So he kind of gave the update on Snape and Quirrell. And basically it was like, so you mean the stone's only safe as long as Quirrell stands up to Snape? And Ron's like, it'll be gone by next Tuesday. So this is the chapter that really wasn't the same as the movie, kind of starting with Snape's refereeing. So that is something that wasn't really mentioned. And then also the Neville leg locking doesn't really happen either. Kind of going back to the Dumbledore card and like discovering Nicholas Flamel that way, it actually was Hermione that was like, oh my god, like I found him. And it was the big old book that she's like, I'm doing just for light reading, that she found it versus Harry finding it initially through the card. And then like that was the piggyback. So they just kind of cut that little bit out and was like, oh my god, it's actually in this book. There was nothing about Malfoy antagonizing. There wasn't anything about them practicing the swish and flick of like the leg locking curse, you know, for the Quidditch game. It really just like was kind of cropped out in general, like this whole chapter, the more I'm thinking about it. And like, please correct me if I'm wrong, but like there wasn't another Quidditch game. There wasn't anything about Snape refereeing. There wasn't anything with Neville walking in or getting into the common room leg locked and all of that. And then obviously there wasn't that Forbidden Forest meeting. Like we do kind of see like Snape up against Quirrell that they kind of stumble upon like in the corridors, and I think that was kind of like the related scene. I can't remember exactly where in the movie that is, but I think that's like as close as we get to it. That chapter really wasn't in the book at all. And neither is this coming chapter all that much. This is chapter 14, and everyone's kind of panicking because, you know, now it's like, oh my god, exams are coming up, like we need to do homework and really study. Hagrid comes into the library and is like, oh my god, like, and they're like, what are you doing? And he's like, just looking. And he's like, are you still looking to Flamel? And they're like, oh no, we already know all about him. All good, all good. And Ron's like, oh, we found out who he is ages ago, and we know what the dog's guarding. It's the Sorcerer's Stone. And then like he gets cut off by Hagrid. And it's like, do you want everyone to like hear, bro? What's the matter with you? And they're like, keep talking about the stone. And they're like, there's a few things we wanted to ask you as matter of fact, said Harry, you know, about the stone. Hagrid's like, all right, like listen, come and see me later. I'm not promising I'll tell you anything, but like, let's not do this here. They later meet at Hagrid's hut. They talk about how they see the book that Hagrid is hiding behind his back with something about dragons. They're talking about how dragons are illegal. Essentially, you know, it's blazing hot when they reach Hagrid's hut, and all the windows and everything's shut and it's warm. They're like, we're wondering if you could tell us what's guarding the stone, Sorcerer's Stone, apart from Fluffy. And Hagrid frowned. He's like, of course I can't. Number one, I don't know myself. Number two, you already know too much, so I wouldn't tell you if I could. The stone's here for a good reason. It was almost stolen out of Gringotts. I suppose you worked that all out. Beat me how you even know about Fluffy. It kind of just is like, oh, come on. Hermione's like sweet talking him, and then he's like, well, I suppose it won't hurt to tell you. Let's see, he borrowed Fluffy from me, and some of the teachers did enchantments. Professor Sprout, Professor Flitwick, Professor McGonagall, he ticked off his fingers. Professor Quirrell and Dumbledore himself did something. Oh, and I've almost forgotten, Professor Snape. And everyone's like, Snape? What? He's like, you're still not thinking about, still on that about you? Like, Snape's here to protect the stone. He's not about to steal it. And everyone's like, yeah, we're not on the same board with that, but like, we're not gonna say that to you. And they're like, how do you get past Fluffy? And he's like, Hagrid's like, not a soul knows except me and Dumbledore. Harry's like, can we please open the window? Like, it is molting hot in here. And he's like, I can't. What's in the fire? And there's a huge black egg, which turns out to be a dragon egg. Surprise. I was down in the village and having a few drinks and got into a game of cards with a stranger. What I've got here is the Norwegian Ridgeback. They're rare, them. That's kind of the end of that little visit. So now they have something else to worry about. So then they get a letter from Hagrid saying it's hatching. So they basically like get through class, herbology, and they like rush down there. And you know, they see the egg hatch into this little baby dragon, which so jealous. Like, I would live for a dragon. Like, oh, I so want one. And they're like, isn't he beautiful? And then Hagrid's like, bless him. Look, he knows his mummy. Someone was peeking through the window, which happened to be Malfoy, who was running back up to the castle. So later on, that was like the end of that session. They're like, oh my God, like Malfoy's seen the dragon. God, what is he gonna do? So everyone's so nervous. They were like, Hagrid, like, you need to set him free. And Hagrid's like, he can't, like, he's not gonna live. And he's like, I've decided to call him Norbert. And Ron's like, hey, like, you know, Charlie, he's in Romania, he's studying dragons, like, we could send Norbert to him. Charlie can take care of him and then put him back to the wild. And like, they ended up like convincing him for that. They sent Charlie a letter just asking like, hey, can we do this? A week goes by and they finally get another letter, which is like, I'd be glad to take the Norwegian Ridgeback, but it won't be easy getting him here. I think the best thing will be to send him over with some friends of mine who are coming to visit me next week. Trouble is, they mustn't be seen carrying an illegal dragon. Could you get the Ridgeback up the tallest tower at midnight on Saturday? They can meet you there and take him away while it's still dark. Send me an answer as soon as possible. Love, Charlie. So they're like, yeah, okay, we got the invisibility cloak. I think we can fit a dragon underneath that with two of us. And they're like, okay, that's the plan. So, you know, eventually Hagrid's like, all right, like, okay. But Norbert ends up biting Ron, and later, like that next day, Ron gets like, his hand gets super infected. So they're like, oh my God, I think it's poisonous. So he ended up going to the hospital wing, and he had his little book. And I guess Malfoy came and like kind of bothered him for a while and ended up taking his book, which he later on realized oh my God, like Charlie's letter is in that book that Malfoy has. Harry and Hermione are like, okay, like we don't have time, like we got to do this now. Basically they go meet Hagrid, and Hagrid's like, okay, like I think he's ready to go, like kind of feels bad about this. Hagrid's like, and I've packed his teddy bear in case he gets lonely. Oh, bless him. Bless him. And then so Hermione and Harry are taking it with the invisibility cloak, and there was sudden movement. They were up to the nearest, they were in the tallest tower, and there was sudden movement ahead of them, and there was dark outlines of two people, Professor McGonagall and Malfoy. And she's like telling him that he's got detention, you know, sneaking, wandering around in the middle of the night. And Malfoy's like, you don't understand, Professor, Harry Potter's coming. He's got a dragon. And she's not believing this. She's like, wait till I tell Snape. They end up getting to the top of the tower. They meet Charlie's friends, who are just a bunch of hoots, you know, having a good time, and they take Norbert. They leave the invisibility cloak on top of the tower. So silly. And Hermione and Harry get caught by Filch. And he's like, well, 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 he whispered, we are in trouble. So essentially, this whole scene, like, doesn't really happen. Like, yeah, we have Norbert the dragon, super brief. You know, it talks about how Hagrid wins him in the movie, like he wins him in a game, and that like Malfoy oversees, you know, he's peering through and he sees it or whatever. Not so much overhearing, so he's kind of already interest peak, like he's just randomly at the mirror or window or whatever, and he sees it, and then pretty much immediately, I believe it's McGonagall. He's with McGonagall, and the three of them get detention. And the four of them, excuse me. Yeah, the trio and Malfoy get detention from McGonagall and be like, you know what, like you can't be doing this or whatever. And Malfoy's like shocked, like, oh hey, I got detention too. So they get detention. And that's kind of like the end of that. Like there's no do the dragon heist of like shipping them out. It later on comes out like that Norbert, like Dumbledore's like, they end up sending Norbert to Charlie anyways, but it's by Dumbledore's doing and not so much by the trio's doing. So it was done differently, but same outcome, essentially. There was no bite to Ron's hand, so Ron was totally involved, and therefore he's involved with the detention. So it's the four of them, the trio and Malfoy, that get detention, which we know is not the case. McGonagall's like, oh my God, and Neville's like, oh Harry, like I tried to stop you, like I saw that Harry or Malfoy was coming to like get you or whatever, because he was saying that you guys were going to catch you and like you had a dragon, and like everyone's like, shut up, oh my God, like you even told Neville this lie, like cannot believe you guys. And poor Neville gets detention with them. So in the book, it's Hermione, Harry, Neville, and Malfoy that get detention, not Ron. Ron's still out of commission. So basically they're all just like defeated. Neville feels like he's just been lied to and betrayed and like is so hurt, which poor guy. He's just trying to help his friends out. McGonagall's like 50 points taken from each of you guys, so that's 150 points like down the tank. They are mortified by this because this drops them out of the lead, and everyone's just mad at them for it. Like everyone in Gryffindor is like so upset by this. So then eventually, you know, some time goes by, they get a message from Professor McGonagall being like, the detention will take place at 11 o'clock tonight. Meet Mr. Filch in the entrance hall. Professor McGonagall. Sorry, could not read that. Meet up with Mr. Filch later that night. So it's the three of them and Malfoy, and Mr. Filch is having a field day with it where he's like, oh yeah, like there's werewolves out here, like better be it's super dangerous. Like you're gonna go see Hagrid and help Hagrid out in the forest. And everyone's like so nervous, and Neville's like freaking out. Hagrid's coming out with them with Fang, his dog. Filch is like, okay, like they're all yours, I'll be back at dawn, for what's left of them. So basically Hagrid's like, hey, like we got a little bit of a situation here, like you see this stuff shining on the ground, this silvery stuff, it's unicorn blood. Like there's unicorn in there that's been hurt super bad. Like this is the second time in a week, like I found one dead last Wednesday. We're gonna try and find the poor thing, like have to put it out of its misery, so I need your help to find them. Hagrid's like, okay, so me, Harry, and Hermione will go one way, Draco, Neville, and Fang will go the other. And they split off and they're kind of looking around. All of a sudden a centaur kind of rolls out and name is Ronan, and Hagrid's like, how are you? And he's like asking like careful, he's like, have you seen anything? Ronan's basically being dodgy and was like, Mars is bright tonight. And Hagrid's like, all right, okay. And then they're like unusually bright, like he just keeps repeating it. And then Bane rolls up and was like, Hagrid's like, how you doing, Bane? Like, everything all right? And he's like, well, look, I've just been asking around and like, have you seen anything weird going on? And Bane answers the same way. He was like, Mars is bright tonight. That, and then they see red sparks and they go like finding the other group, because that was like their panic sign, just to find out that Malfoy scared Neville and he sent up sparks. So Hagrid's like super over it and he's like, we need to get this done. And so he pairs up Harry, Malfoy, and Fang together, and then Neville's with Hagrid and Hermione. You know, Malfoy and Harry are like walking around, and then they see, you know, a figure kind of leaning over the unicorn and is like obviously drinking his blood. Malfoy screams, triggering the creature or whatever to look their way, and like as they are, like he runs off. Harry starts getting a pain in his scar or whatever's like kind of making him, so he's like stumbling, he's like, I can't really see, so bad. And then he looks up, and then right as like the cloak figure is kind of getting to him, a centaur jumps out, and it's a new one, saves him, and basically his name is Friends. And he's like, oh, you are the Potter boy. He's like, you better get back to Hagrid. The forest is not safe at this time, especially for you. Can you ride? It will be quicker this way. So basically Harry rides Friends back to the group, and Bane is there, and he's like, Friends, like, what are you doing? You have a human on your back. Like, have you no shame? And Friends is like, do you know who this is? Like, the quicker he leaves the forest, the better. And like, he's actually kind of giving some more information. It was like, do you not see this unicorn? Like, we cannot be looking away. And Bane's like, gotta let, you know, the planets align or whatever. Like, let the prophecy happen as it should. And Friends was like, no, like, we can prevent dying if we need to. So they get back to the Quidditch common room, the Gryffindor common room, and they're like, they find Ron sleeping or whatever, so they wake him up and kind of tell him what's going on with him and Hermione. Or Harry began to tell him and Hermione what happened, and then he was like, Snape wants the stone for Voldemort, and Voldemort's waiting in the forest, and all this time we thought Snape just wanted to get rich. Then Harry kind of goes back to, you know, his bed, and that's when he finds there's his invisibility cloak folded neatly underneath it with a note pin saying, just in case. So in the movie, we don't see, obviously, Neville in this. It's the trio and Malfoy, and they're paired up about the same. We don't see the sweaty Quirrell, you know, talking to himself or whatever. That doesn't happen. Yeah, in the forest, like, they encounter Firenze. Getting ahead of myself. So they're looking around. Malfoy and Harry stumble across the cloak figure, and it's drinking his blood. Malfoy screams, bolts, Fang bolts. The cloak figure is approaching Harry. No scar burning or anything like that. He just like trips over some wood or whatever, and falls down, and is saved by the centaur, which is Firenze. Firenze doesn't really say too much. The rest of the crew finds them versus Firenze taking him to the rest of the crew, and that was kind of a short-lived moment for that. Nothing with the cloak being returned because it was never lost in the movie. So that was kind of like the only thing that was actually in the movie and the book. The rest of it has been kind of cropped out. So like, it's almost like this chapter and a half that is like missing from the movie. Maybe like 2 chapters, honestly. So that was kind of like the only difference that I can think of at this time that was between them. So now it comes to chapter 16, you know, doing all the exams, and they're like, oh my God, like finally exams are over. Like, and Harry's getting so frustrated because his scar just is burning, and he's like, I think it's a warning. Like, I think something bad's coming. He's getting so irritated by it. And don't you think it's odd that Hagrid wants more than anything else is a dragon, and a stranger who turns up just happens to have an egg in his pocket? How many people wander around with dragon eggs if it's against wizard law? They found Hagrid, don't you think? Why didn't I see it before? And so they go visit Hagrid, gambling, essentially. Like, did you talk about Hogwarts at all? And he's like, might have come up. Told him I was a gamekeeper or whatever, and, you know, talked about the sort of creatures I looked after, and I told him, you know, about Fluffy, and did you seem interested in Fluffy? Yeah, how many 3-headed dogs do you meet, even at Hogwarts? So I told him, Fluffy's a piece of cake. If you know how to calm him down, just play him a bit of music and he'll go straight to sleep. Hagrid looks suddenly horrified. I shouldn't have told you that. Forget what I was saying. And then, like, the trio took off. And he's like, we've got to get to Dumbledore, said Harry, and, like, we need to tell him what's going on. And they bump into Professor McGonagall, and they're like, hey, where's Dumbledore? And he's like, oh, He left about 10 minutes ago, got an urgent owl from the Ministry of Magic, and flew off for London. And Harry's like, he's gone? Like, oh, now? You know what? Like, we're just gonna come clean. Professor, it's about the Sorcerer's Stone. She was shocked, to say the least. She was basically like, stop thinking about it, go be a student and like go out in the sunshine or whatever. And like, they're like, okay, but they obviously didn't. And Harry's like, it's tonight, like Snape's gonna be going to the trapdoor tonight. So like, basically they're like, okay, like, you know what, like, we're just gonna go for it. And like, Hermione's like, you can't, like, you'll be expelled. And Harry's like, so what? Like, if Voldemort comes back, like, it doesn't fucking matter. So after dinner, everyone was kind of just hanging around until everyone fell asleep. They put on the cloak, and then they kind of just, like, attempt to leave the Gryffindor common room, just for them to find Neville appearing from an armchair clutching Trevor. He's like, what are you doing? And they're like, nothing. Neville's like, you're going out again. Neville's like, you can't go out, like, you'll be caught. Gryffindor will be in even more trouble. And he's like, so upset by it. And he's like, I'll fight you. And Ron's like, Neville, like, you get away from the hole, like, don't be an idiot. And he's like, I don't think you should be breaking any more rules. And you were the one who told me to stand up to people. Ron's like, yeah, but not to us. So essentially, Hermione's like, I'm so sorry about this. And she casts oh God, I'm not even gonna fucking say it. Well, I'll try, but please be nice to me in the comments. Petrificus totalis. Sorry, I feel like so dumb saying that. It was like, oh my God, it's a full body bind. So they like step over and they're like, we had to, Neville, like, we'll chat more later. And they hustle down. They get to trap door with the dog, and they play Hagrid's flute, and they're just playing like some tunes, and it's working. So they're passing the tune or the flute between them as they basically get the courage to jump through the trap door. So they all end up jumping in, and they land into the Devil's Snare, the plants, and they're like, it's all like crawling around me or whatever, and they're like, oh my, Hermione's like, oh, like Devil's Snare, what did Professor Sprout say? It likes the dark and the damp. Harry's like, so light a fire. And then Hermione's like, yes, of course, but there's no wood. And then Ron's like, have you gone mad? Are you a witch or not? So she cats a bluebell flame or whatever, lights them, it lets go of them, and they're just like unraveling themselves, and they go down a hallway, and then they go into the key room or whatever, you know, see like the flying keys or whatever, the wings, and they're like, oh, it's got to be one of these keys, and they're like, oh look, it's got to be the one with the broken wing, with the bum wing. And they all each get on a broomstick. They all three fly around and are grabbing this key. Actually grab it, and they end up opening the door into a chess room. That's when they realize that they need to play chess to get through to the other side. And at the end, where Ron's like, you know, like, I gotta sacrifice myself, and then Harry, you know, you go in for checkmate or whatever, and Hermione's like, no. And they're like, do you want to stop Snape or not? And it wasn't the, no, Ron, no, you can't. The, not me, not Hermione, you. To find out that this wasn't in the book, I was low-key devastated. Like, that is the best part of that movie, like one of the best parts. And I'm like, it wasn't, I swear it was in the book. Ron sacrifices himself, he gets taken out. Hermione and Harry press on and reach open the door, and they find like there's a troll in front of them who's already been knocked out, so they just kind of skip right over him and into another door. Black flames shoot up on the doorway in front, so they have to finish the riddle or whatever, which with Hermione, you know, figuring it out. So basically it was just like, oh, like, this isn't magic, it's logic, a puzzle. And she's like, yeah, like, drink this one, I'll drink this one, where I can go back and, you know, save Ron and, you know, send a letter to Dumbledore. This one will take you forward to the next one. It works, they rush off, you know. So he walks through to find not Snape in the other room, it is Quirrell. In the movie, it has Snape kind of mentioning, you know, hey, like, you shouldn't be inside, like, you're looking sus, or whatever. Like, that was pretty much on par for the book. And then when they also went to Professor McGonagall and, like, how she's like, hey, like, Dumbledore's not here, you know? He's not here. Go be a student. Like, don't worry about the stone. Like, I don't know how you found out about it, but, like, don't. So, like, those were pretty much on par for that. And then, so they're plotting their plan to go to the trapdoor anyways. Invisibility cloak and all of that, just to be stopped by Neville, who is like sitting in the armchair. He is like gonna fight them, and gets taken out with the full body bind by Hermione, and they're like, I'm so sorry, like I'm so sorry. They get to the trapdoor. There's a harp already playing where the dog is already like sleeping, but the harp is like finishing out right as they're jumping in. They land on the plant, and then instead of like flames to get them loose, it was more of a relax into it and it'll drop you down. But with with Ron, who like could not relax, like it turned out to be a light spell versus a fire spell, which tomato probably for a devil snare. I don't know, like that was a different detail. And they dropped down versus like getting out, where I feel like it wasn't mentioned in the book of them dropping down. They just kind of untangled themselves and carried on down a hallway. And then they obviously get to the key room. They see the bummed key or whatever, the bummed wing key, and Harry, you know, is the only one flying on the broomstick, where the key's kind of attacking them or going crazy, instead of the three of them doing it and like working together as a team. So that was kind of an interesting tidbit as well. Going into the chess scene plays out, and like the whole not me, not Hermione, you. Ron gets taken out. Hermione stays back to help Ron and also send a note to Dumbledore. And we basically bypassed the troll and Snape's poison test and straight into the final boss battle. That was the differences, which I'm like, oh, I really wish they kind of kept the poison one. Like, I wonder why they didn't. I think that was just like a cool character trait for Hermione to kind of showcase her talent a little bit more. Like, we already know she's book smart, but like just kind of seeing it like hold on her own for that. Although like in the movie, like Hermione's like propping up Harry the whole time, but we'll get into that. But anyways, the last chapter of this book, guys, it is so late. Girl is tired. We are gonna finish strong with this. So Harry finds Quirrell at the end of this corridor, if you will, and he's like, oh, you. And basically Quirrell just comes clean, where it's like, yeah, like it wasn't Snape all along, it was me trying to kill you, you know? Oh, at the Quidditch game, it was me. It was freaking Snape that was trying to ruin it for me. But you know, blasted Granger trying to like set fire, causing me to break my eye contact. And Harry's like, oh my god, like it really was you. And Quirrell's like, yeah, like no one would recognize, you know, stuttering Quirrell next to Snape. Kind of, you know, ingenious in that aspect. Quirrell's looking in the mirror of Erised, and he's like, I see the stone, but I like can't, how do I get it? I was like, yeah, come here, you know, and Harry's like, I gotta lie. He's like, and the Quirrell's like, what do you see in the mirror? And Harry's like, yeah, look, I got the house cup for Gryffindor, you know, I'm shaking hands with Dumbledore. Quirrell's like, you know, get out of the way, and like their voice is like, he lies, and was like, let me speak to him like face to face. As he watches Quirrell like unwrap the turban, basically sees the horrific face on the back of Quirrell's head, which is Voldemort. And Voldemort's like kind of talking to him as Quirrell's walking backwards, and basically is like, see what I've become, you know, mere shadow and vapor. You know, I have form only when I can share another's body. Unicorn blood has strengthened me these past weeks. You saw faithful Quirrell drinking it for me in the forest, and once I have the elixir of life, I'll be able to create a body of my own. He's like, now why don't you give me the stone in the pocket? Which I forgot to mention. Harry, when he looked in the mirror, like he saw himself looking back and like winking and like putting the stone in his pocket, which manifested in real life. Voldemort's like, seize him! And Quirrell's hand closes in on his wrist, Harry's wrist, and right at once, like he has burning blisters all over his hand, and Harry's scar is burning like crazy. So he's like, I'm blind, I can't see. And then Quirrell's burning as well. Harry like looks around, and then he's like, oh my gosh, like I have a power basically, and goes and like jumps and like touches his face all over the place and like starts to burn him like crazy, but the pain in his scar intensifies. Harry's like fighting, and all of a sudden he basically like passes out, and it's dark as like he hears like Harry like in the background. And then we fast forward to Harry waking up, and he is in the hospital wing. He sees Dumbledore like looking down at him and was like, "Good afternoon," freaking out. He's like, "Oh my god, like the stone, like Quirrell's got it." And Dumbledore's like, "Don't worry, like Quirrell does not have the stone. You are a little behind the times." And then he's like, "Please relax." Basically, Harry found out he's been there for 3 days, and that Ron and Hermione are okay, and that they're gonna be so relieved that he's around. Harry's like, "I got so many questions." Basically, it was like, "Yeah, so had a chat with my good old friend Nicholas Flamel, and we decided, the stone should not be kept around any longer, so it's been destroyed." And basically it was like, "What happened to Voldemort?" And he's like, "He's still out there somewhere, perhaps looking for another body to share. Not being truly alive, he cannot be killed." And Harry's like, okay, there's some other things, if you can tell me." And then he's like, "Why would Voldemort want to kill me in the first place?" Dumbledore is like, "The first thing you ask me, I cannot tell you. Not today, not now, but you'll know one day. When you're older, I know you hate to hear this. When you are ready, you will know." And then he's like, "Why couldn't Quirrell touch me?" He's like, "Your mother died to save you. If there's one thing Voldemort cannot understand, it is love. He didn't realize that love as powerful as your mother's for you leaves its own mark." And then he's asking about how I got the stone out of the mirror, and he's basically like, "Oh, that's like one of my better tricks. You see, only one who wanted to find the stone, find it, but not use it, would be able to get it. Otherwise, they just see themselves making gold or drinking elixir of life. My brain surprises even me sometimes." Now enough questions. Later on, Madame Pomfrey lets Ron and Hermione in. Harry lets them know that, Nicholas Flamel, the stone's destroyed and all of that. For the feast, Harry was able to convince Madame Pomfrey to attend, so they do, and Hagrid bumped into Harry and was like, "Hey, I'm so sorry, it's my fault." He gave Harry a little family album that he was able to get from all of his parents' friends, old school friends, asking for photos and stuff, and eventually made his way down to the end of the year feast, which Slytherin was winning for this. Took the house cup, everything was Slytherin colors. Dumbledore was like, "Okay, these are the scores, Gryffindor dead last, Slytherin winning." However, recent events, he kind of goes off with Ron, getting best played game of chess of Hogwarts has ever seen in many years, 50 points for Gryffindor. Hermione got, for the use of cool logic in the place of fire, Gryffindor house 50 points. Harry Potter, for pure nerve and outstanding courage, award 60 points. And then at the very last, at this point in time, they're tied exactly with Slytherin in terms of points for the house cup. And Dumbledore raises his hands and he's like, "Well, there are all kinds of courage. It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends. I therefore award 10 points to Neville Longbottom." Gryffindor won the house cup and redecorated the Great Hall with Gryffindor colors. Take off on the train and was like, "Hey, promise we'll talk to each other this summer by owls," and all of that stuff. We fucking made it. All right, we made it through the whole book and the movie. So the movie, the ending scene was pretty similar in terms of how they fight, but I have some final thoughts. So if you made it this far, thanks for hanging with me. That was a marathon, and I knew it would be, but it was even more than I thought it would be, to be honest. First things first is how in the movies it kind of bothers me that they portray Harry as more passive, where in the books he's more proactive, he's more eager, he's more ambitious or risk-taking than he is in the movies. He's willing to find out, he's willing to kind of risk it all and risk it for the biscuit. In the movies, Hermione kind of props him up and being like, Nicholas Flamel, and I did all these things, and the restricted section and all of this stuff, but in reality, in the books, it was actually Harry. So kind of an interesting choice for that in terms of I don't really get why they did that, where I feel that seemed like a very easy thing to translate over into the movie. And I will forever die on this hill, but why did we not use Neville more in the movies? It makes me kind of upset because he is already such a huge key part in the first book, pretty much off rip. and like he is used a little bit throughout the movie, but like his character doesn't really like come into full part of the crew until like I feel like the 5th movie. So I thought that was interesting, and I will forever die on that hill. And even Malfoy had a bigger role in the book than he did in the movie, where he was already introduced pretty early on, and then like just taunting throughout the book as well. And on top of that, the one thing that, if you guys remember, is that the whole shaking of hands in the book, in the Leaky Cauldron between Quirrell and Harry, how did that not cause the burn or the blistering that happened when Quirrell had his hand around Harry's throat at the end? So I thought that was interesting, because I swear that Quirrell already had Voldemort as part of his underneath the turban at that time. And like, please let me know if it does happen later on in the year or whatever, because I don't know and I haven't looked it up. But that is something that I'm like, is that a plot hole? Is there just more lore inside of, you know, what was going on? But that was just kind of an interesting tidbit, where like in the movie they don't even touch when they meet in the Leaky Cauldron. Also in the movie, when Quirrell has his hand around Harry's throat, he's not burning until Harry actually touches him. So like he can touch Harry, but Harry can't touch him. And I got a little mixed up where in the book Quirrell grabs his wrist and not his throat and burns or whatever. So I'm kind of wondering like, what's the why is there a discrepancy there? I feel like that would be a simple fix. Those are my thoughts. I mean, either way, this is just an enjoyable time. I watched the movie so many times, but like the books are just kind of revisiting the wizarding world in a more depth than the movies can portray. And I also know that we also have the potential series coming out, which I hope they do its service, but I plan on doing the series, and I have a couple other book movie series that I have planned. Either way, like, let me know if there has been anything that I've missed. Without further ado, I do have a link to a bookshop, which pick your own local bookshop to directly support when you buy books, or just add to the pool where it gets dispersed across the multiple local bookshops. So that is something that I have linked below and in my bio, and you are welcome to go check it out. It does support me. That is something that I'm hoping to kind of grow more into, and hopefully kind of give back more to our book communities that are outside of Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, things like that, where they're kind of like the giants that aren't really giving back to the mom and pop shops that are around. If you made it this far, thanks for hanging. I appreciate ya, and I will see y'all in the next one. Love you, see you, bye.